I'm Sandra Kelly, and I'm reading from On the Drop Side of Yonder by Jacqueline Brunet. This is Chapter 6, Mischief, Customs, and Tricks. And Jacqueline Brunet was growing up in a small town in America in the 30s and 40s, and you'll see what it meant to love Halloween in that period of time. My older sister Marlene was a bit of a hell-raiser when she reached the teen years, but my brother, Elwin, 2 years younger than I, was born that way. My mother's patience was tried enormously by the behavior of those two. I dreaded her anger and frustration, so I tried to tread softly and be the good child, bringing home A's, behaving properly, towing the line, and not making waves. Sometimes I deserved reprimands, and I received my share, usually when the standards of cleanliness in my room fell dismally short of my mother's. Deep within, I longed to rebel when I was 10 or 11. In our little town, smoking was proper for men, but not for women. It was scandalous behavior, but my friends Catherine and Pat's mother smoked. She was a person who seldom left the house, except to play bridge with a group of women twice a month. I remember feeling very uncomfortable when my friends and I walked in one day and caught her. When Catherine and I decided to pretend we were movie stars, she gathered the cigarette butts her mother had cast aside. And we tried it. After we got through the coughing fits, we imitated Greta Garbo, Bette Davis, Marlene Dietrich, and others in vogue at the time. We hid out in an unused pig pen at the back of Catherine's dad's property every few days, partaking of the forbidden fruit. Catherine's dad had a business, so he was not around the property most of the time. One day, however, he caught us. All he said in a firm voice was, "Smoking is not a good policy." And he turned around and left. We slunk away, and I dawdled my way home. I suffered torment for days, waiting for word to get back to my mother and the storm that would surely follow. It didn't happen. I should have learned from that experience, but I didn't. Hiding places were hard to find until I happened to think of the trees just beyond the village limits on the road to Stockbridge. They were old and marvelous, perfect for climbing. We could climb high enough that we could not be seen and play all kinds of games, from cowboys, our mounts were the thick, almost horizontal limbs, to bandits, to aviators, movie stars, explorers, anything our imaginations could conjure. What better place to smoke? It still seemed so deliciously wicked. Book matches were fairly new at the time, at least to me, and I had smoked a couple of butts and was lighting up of the third. But apparently I didn't get the lighted match far enough away from the book. The whole thing, the whole matchbook ignited in my hand, burned painfully, and I had to use all my stoical reserves not to cry from the pain. I went home knowing that I couldn't tell anyone. If ever I needed a little loving care and perhaps something to alleviate the pain, it was then. But I definitely learned the lesson. Don't play with fire. If anyone asked me about weird customs, beliefs, practices, and remedies that affected me as a child, my first thought was that my mother was an enlightened person for her time, and that I couldn't think of any. Delving into memory now, however, I've come up with quite a few. Some affected me, and some did not. My mother made use of mustard plasters for really bad chest colds. The mixture was made of lard and dry mustard smeared on a couple of layers of outing flannel. The noxious mixture was spread between layers and placed on the chest and the neck at bedtime. I can still feel the sting against my skin as the lard softened and the mustard made contact. I also recall that I felt much better in the morning. When I was rearing my own children, doctors ridiculed the practice and said the mother should put it on her own chest. It would do the child just as much good. Rubbing the chest with Vicks or camphorated oil was the usual nighttime chest cold remedy when I was a child. My own children rebelled and wouldn't let me apply Vicks to their chests. A cure for sore throat was the spraying of diluted mercurochrome against the back of the throat. If you ever wanted something to make you gag, that was it. Again, I have distinct recollections of feeling much improved a few hours after treatment. It was one I never tried on my own children. Gargling with salt water was a common treatment. A woman in Florida, originally from New Jersey, told me that her mother cut up slices of raw bacon and wrapped them in the flannel and placed them on her throat. She said she still uses that remedy and that it works. For skin infections, particularly on the feet and the hands, we soak the affected parts in Epsom salts. It always brought around a cure, and I admit I still use it on occasion. I've never had a doctor recommend it or support the use of it. I recall my mother expressing disdain over the use of laudanum on children. It seems we had some distant relatives who used it to keep their kids quiet, and the kids grew up foolish. I don't know what laudanum was composed of, but it was certainly some form of addictive substance. My dad's mother died when he was only 8 years old, and for 1 year the 6 kids were parceled out to relatives. Dad stayed with his maternal grandmother, and while he was there he developed what was called a stone bruise on the bottom of his foot. It must have been an abscess from the description he gave. When it became excruciating, his grandmother collected fresh, warm cow manure, placed it in a paper bag, and plunged Dad's foot into it, tying the top of the bag around his leg, and then sent him to bed. He went to bed that way, but he said during the night he felt that sore rupture, and when the purulent material drained away, it gave him much relief. Death had a number of strange rituals. One custom I recall was that of placing a wreath on the door. When I asked about it, my mother said it meant someone in the house had died, and that spooked me so much, so that whenever I saw a wreath on a door, I crossed to the other side of the street. My mother-in-law told me that when her little boy Glenn had been struck by a car and killed, neighbors came to express sympathy. But one woman hustled through the house and pulled all the window shades down and said it was the proper thing to do until after the funeral. My mother-in-law could never bear to have the shades lowered after that. Thankfully, I was reared after funeral parlors came into being, and I was spared ever having a corpse in my house, so I must resort to family lore for the anecdotes. When one of my grandfather's friends from up north passed away, an all-night wake was held. I've read the wake was necessary so the participants could keep the mice off the corpse. Liquor flowed freely, and after the funeral, it was my grandfather and another friend's duty to take the deceased to the cemetery. It was in the middle of winter, and the roads were covered with snow. The coffin was placed on a flat sledge and pulled by a horse, and when they arrived at the cemetery, they discovered to their great merriment the corpse had fled. They retraced the route and found the escapee's coffin on a snowbank and took it to its final resting place. No doubt our descendants will think present-day customs are quaint and strange as well. When I was a child in Gregory, Halloween was one of the most exciting days of the year. First of all, The day after, I could hardly wait to find out how many and whose outside toilets had been shoved over on their sides. Slightly less than half the population of Gregory still relied on wooden outside toilets, and this occurred every year, usually to well-known, disagreeable persons. When privies were overturned, it was usually in retaliation for a real or imagined transgression on the part of the owner. The second delight of the day was rushing outside to see what farm equipment was perched on top of the flat-topped schoolhouse. The oldest students were in the 9th and 10th grades, and many lived on farms. Usually the equipment was old, but it was large, and nobody claimed it. Men from Gregory had to get it down and dispose of it before the school day could begin. In theory, if we did not get a treat, the trick was to soap windows. We didn't do it usually unless we really disliked the occupants. The stores in our village closed early, so they were ripe for tricks, but we usually soaped the windows of only one store. The owner was always complaining about something, and it was payback time. From some mothers we got wonderful homemade fudge candy, special cookies, and sometimes pennies and even nickels. Some of the moms made us sing songs before they gave us anything, and most moms at least came to their doors and treated us. If they didn't, we waxed their windows good and proper. 2 or 3 women in Gregory never left their homes, and little brats that we were, we usually pounded on the doors several times, knowing they were never coming and wanted us to go away. The older boys were more ingenious in their tricks. I remember seeing corn shucks and pumpkins pilfered from fields, blocking the entrances to stores and the schoolhouse, and on one occasion some young Turks had gone to the train station and taken the 4-wheeled wagon which was used to wheel freight from the train to the depot. They'd somehow managed to place it on top of the school. One thing we always saw at Halloween were pumpkins smashed up all over the roads. And it showed the older kids could be just as rotten as 75 years ago as they are sometimes now. Halloween was a fun day at school, and it was a time when we were allowed to wear costumes, and there was a party, and after recess in the afternoons we had treats, mostly candy corn and popcorn balls, made by the more ambitious of the mothers. Our costumes consisted of clothes from our older siblings' and parents' closets, modified, of course, to present gypsies, witches, tramps, pirates, and ghosts, along with cowboys and cowgirls. I remember that my friend Catherine and I one year dressed in our dad's long-legged underwear and a ghostly mask, of course. One bit of excitement was to line up and tramp through our schoolroom and the 2 other rooms, 5th grade through 7th and 8th through 10th, to show off our costumes. Most of us had a wonderful time, but the thing I never understood was the sight of a small group of farm kids that burst into tears. Apparently they were frightened by our goofy homemade costumes. Sometimes the Sunday school teacher had a Halloween party for her class, which causes me to believe that Halloween wasn't thought to be necessarily associated with pagan celebrations back then. I recall bobbing for apples, no hands, and a big washtub of water all the way to the bottom. We also formed into partners and had to eat an apple with our hands held behind our backs. I remember how much fun it was to dress up someone else and beg for treats before dark, but after supper. And there was something about it because it was never allowed at any other time. It was pleasant, and it was a harmless thing to do. I can't help wondering whether kids of today have much fun as we did with their expensive costumes. Also, luckily, we never had to worry that someone might do us harm. And although I hate to be a grump, I think the decorating today is ridiculous. I can't help thinking that the money some people spend on lavish decorations for Halloween could be put to better use. Let the kids enjoy themselves and the adults stay out of it. You've been listening to a chapter from On the Drop Side of Yonder by Jacqueline Brunet. There are 14 chapters in this book, which means there are 13 more that you need to hear.